Ever try budgeting for groceries, but the store changes prices like every hour? And they keep adding new stuff you've never even seen before. Oh, and the self-checkout. Let's just say it's really easy to accidentally buy an extra bag of chips you didn't mean to. That's kind of what managing cloud costs can feel like. It's a wild ride. But no worries, friends. Today we're becoming savvy cloud cost wranglers. In this deep dive, we're tackling planning and estimating. It's part of the FinOps framework, this whole set of best practices for getting a grip on your cloud spending. And it comes straight from the FinOps Foundation.
You're definitely in the right place to wrangle those costs, because this isn't just about saving money. It's about really understanding what your cloud decisions are costing you, the financial implications.
Okay, so we're talking about more than just like, how much is this going to cost me on AWS or Azure each month?
Way more. See, the beauty and the headache of cloud computing is its flexibility. You need more server power? Boom, spin it up instantly. Want to test a new service? Go for it. But all that agility, it can make budgeting a real nightmare.
Okay, I'm starting to see the challenge here. What makes cloud cost prediction so different from, say, budgeting for office supplies?
Okay, so imagine your office supply store
Yeah.
changes prices every day.
Yeah.
And then it's like they're constantly rolling out this crazy new stationery you never knew you needed but kind of do.
Yeah.
And to top it off, the checkout system. Well, you might not know you're being charged for that extra stapler until the invoice shows up.
Oh man, that is a recipe for a budgeting nightmare. So, what are the main things that cause this constant state of flux in cloud costs?
Well, cloud providers are constantly changing things up. Their services, the pricing, you name it. Take serverless architecture, for instance. It's popular because you only pay for what you use, which is a huge difference from traditional servers that have fixed costs no matter what. But to really get accurate cost estimates, you got to understand the ins and outs of these pricing models.
Okay, that makes sense, but it also sounds, well, really complicated. So how does this FinOps framework help navigate all this complexity?
FinOps brings structure to this chaos. Think of it as a roadmap for this ever-changing world of cloud costs. You can actually anticipate changes instead of just reacting to them.
So FinOps can help you become a more strategic cloud user, instead of getting swept away by the currents, so to speak.
Exactly. And that's where the planning and estimating domain comes in. It's more than just throwing out dollar amounts. It's about making smart decisions about how you're using the cloud, taking into account the costs, of course,
Yeah.
but also efficiency and even sustainability.
So less about penny pinching and more about making strategic choices that line up with your overall goals.
You nailed it.
Mm.
It's about knowing what you're getting for your cloud investment and making sure those resources are pushing you towards your goals.
That sounds incredibly valuable. But how does this play out in the real world? Can you give us an example?
Sure. Let's say you have to decide between moving an old application to the cloud using those traditional virtual machines, or, say, taking the plunge into a serverless architecture. They both impact your costs differently. With virtual machines, you're paying for that server capacity whether you're using it or not. But serverless, that's a pay-per-use model. FinOps helps you weigh all that, along with how complicated things are technically and the potential benefits of each approach in the long run.
So that's where the planning and estimating part comes in. You're not just comparing prices, you're really figuring out the long-term value and impact of each choice.
Exactly. You're using data to make smart decisions. And luckily, the FinOps framework has several different methods for estimating these costs.
Okay, so what are some of the techniques used in planning and estimating to, actually get a handle on these costs?
One way is by using cloud cost calculators. The cloud vendors themselves actually provide these. They're easy to find, easy to use, but they might not tell you everything.
Right, like those online calculators that give you a rough idea of what your mortgage payment might be, but then you forget about all those closing costs and fees.
Exactly. That's why using historical data is another good tool. If you've done similar projects in the past, you can use that data to get an idea of what future costs might look like.
Makes sense. And what about trial runs? Those have to factor in, right?
Of course. Just like taking a car for a test drive, you spin up a smaller version of your project in the cloud and gather real-world data about the costs. It's hands-on and can give you some really good insights.
This is reminding me of those travel websites where you can compare flight and hotel options. You can play around with dates, airlines, even neighborhoods, and see how it affects the price. It seems like planning and estimating with FinOps is kind of that you're exploring different options to find what works best.
That is a great analogy. And just like planning a trip where you might think about more than just comfort, convenience, or even sustainability, FinOps encourages you to think about cloud spending holistically.
That makes a lot of sense, especially these days when businesses are really starting to pay attention to their environmental impact.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another crucial aspect of FinOps. It's not a solo mission.
Oh, you mean it takes a village to wrangle these cloud costs?
You got it. To manage cloud costs, well, you need different teams within an organization to work together. It can't just be the tech team off in a silo trying to figure this out.
Right, because what you choose to do with technology affects your financial decisions and vice versa.
Exactly. And FinOps bridges that gap between teams. It helps everyone get on the same page about how different decisions impact the bottom line and the planet.
It sounds like a much better approach than just throwing money at the cloud and hoping for the best.
It really is.
We're talking about bringing people together, looking at data, and then making good choices.
Yes. Speaking of data, let's talk about how we measure success in this wild world of cloud costs.
Okay, I'm all yours. How do we know if our FinOps efforts are actually working?
That's where key performance indicators come in. KPIs. These metrics help us keep track of how we're doing, see where we can improve, and make sure we're on the right path to reach our cloud cost goals.
So if planning and estimating is our roadmap for cloud costs, then KPIs are like those helpful milestones that tell us we're headed in the right direction.
Exactly. And the FinOps framework highlights a few important KPIs that are super helpful for gauging our success.
Okay, I'm hooked. Let's dive into those KPIs and unpack what they tell us about our cloud cost management journey.
So one KPI that's really important is estimate accuracy. Basically, how close are your initial cost guesses to what you actually end up paying? This KPI shows how well you understand your own cloud usage and the stuff that makes your spending go up or down.
So it's not just about hitting a bullseye with your cost target, it's more about understanding why you might be off, right?
Exactly. Like if your costs are consistently way higher than you expected, it might mean you need to rethink how you're forecasting those costs. Or maybe you need to dig deeper into how you're using resources in the first place.
It's like turning those uh-oh moments when the cloud bill arrives into learning opportunities.
You got it. Now, another KPI that's really important is all about speed. How quickly can you put together a cost estimate? In this fast-paced tech world, we need to make smart decisions fast.
Well, time is money, as they say.
You got it. Being able to quickly and accurately estimate your cloud costs lets you jump on opportunities, change directions if you need to, and stay ahead of the game.
So we're talking about more than just crunching numbers here. It's about being agile and responsive with your cloud strategy.
You nailed it. And this all ties into making sure we're actually capturing all the costs involved,
Yeah.
not just the obvious ones either. I'm talking about those hidden fees that can sneak up on you.
Oh, right, like those data transfer fees you mentioned earlier. What are some other common costs that tend to slip through the cracks?
Oh, there are a few. Storage costs, for one. If you're not careful about how long you're keeping data around, those costs can add up fast. And then you've got your support costs. Those can vary a lot depending on the agreement you have with your cloud provider.
It's like ordering what you think is a super affordable meal deal. Then you realize the drinks and sides aren't included. Suddenly, that budget-friendly option isn't such a good deal after all.
Perfect analogy. That's why FinOps stresses the importance of looking at the total cost of ownership, which includes all those less obvious expenses that can still make a big difference.
Makes sense. So we've talked about how important collaboration is in all of this. How do you actually get all these different teams on the same page and make sure they're all speaking the same language when it comes to FinOps?
That's where the FinOps framework is so helpful. It gives everyone a common language and a set of best practices to follow. Remember those FinOps maturity levels we talked about? Crawl, walk, run. Each stage shows how far an organization has come in using FinOps practices.
Okay, I'm drawing a blank. Could you remind me what makes each stage different?
Sure. So crawl is like dipping your toes in. Think of a small team that's new to the cloud. Maybe they're just starting to track their spending, figuring out how to divide costs between teams. It's still pretty basic.
Right, they're just getting their bearings in this whole cloud cost world.
Exactly. Then you move up to walk.
Hmm.
At this stage, you're using more advanced tools and processes. We're talking about dedicated FinOps platforms that can give you really detailed cost breakdowns, automated reports, and even spot weird spending patterns.
So now they're not just tracking spending, right? They're analyzing the trends, seeing where they can save, and being more proactive about managing those costs. They're leveling up their FinOps game.
Exactly. And then we have the run stage. This is when organizations have really hit their stride with FinOps. It's completely woven into how they do things. They've got FinOps experts on their team, And their cost strategies are in sync with their overall business goals. Think seamless integration with financial systems, real-time cost monitoring and forecasting, and even automated cost optimization actions.
Wow, they are not messing around. It sounds like they're basically conducting a whole symphony of cost optimization.
I like that. They're orchestrating their cloud resources and spending in a way that's super efficient and drives real value for the business.
Yeah.
And what's really cool is that it's not about reaching some finish line. It's all about continuously improving, trying new things, and adapting to this ever-changing world of cloud computing.
So even the organizations that reach that run stage are still learning, finding better ways to do things, and pushing the limits of what's possible with FinOps.
Absolutely. That's what makes this such an exciting field to be in.
This has been eye-opening. We've covered why planning and estimating matters, what it involves, and how to do it. Now let's talk impact. How is all of this actually playing out in the real world? Can you give us some examples of organizations that are seeing benefits from these FinOps practices? We've talked about how to approach planning and estimating, but I think it's easy to forget the why sometimes. Like, what kind of impact are we really talking about here?
Oh, the impact can be huge. Imagine you're this fast-growing e-commerce company, right? You've got the holiday season coming up, which means a massive spike in traffic. Now, in the past, you might have just gone overboard and paid for way more cloud resources than you actually needed for most of the year,
Okay, yeah, I can see that happening. It's a common mistake.
and a costly one. But by using the FinOps framework, this company could take advantage of those estimating tools we talked about. They could use a mix of on-demand and reserved instances for their servers, or even look into a serverless setup that scales up or down automatically based on how much traffic they're actually getting.
So they're not just throwing money at a just-in-case scenario. They're optimizing things to match their real needs.
Yeah, exactly. And what does that mean? Direct cost savings. And then they can reinvest that money back into the business, whether it's developing new features, expanding into new markets, or even hiring more talent.
So it's not even just about saving money. It's about using those resources in a smarter way to grow the business.
You got it. And this isn't just for e-commerce. This applies across industries. Think about a media company with tons of large media files to store. FinOps can help them figure out the most cost-effective storage options in the cloud. Things like how often that data needs to be accessed and how long they need to keep it.
So instead of defaulting to the priciest option just to be on the safe side, they're being strategic and choosing options that actually fit their budget and how they work.
Exactly. And we can't forget about sustainability either. By optimizing how they're using the cloud, organizations can shrink their environmental footprint too. Because if you're using fewer cloud resources, you're using less energy overall.
So you're making choices that are good for your business, your budget, and the environment.
Absolutely. And that brings us right back to why collaboration is so important. When you get different teams, finance, engineering, operations, all working together with these FinOps principles in mind, you create a culture where everyone is thinking about costs and taking responsibility.
So it sounds like it's more than just adopting a set of tools or techniques. It's really a fundamental shift in how organizations think about their cloud spending.
I'd say so. It's about ditching that Wild West mentality where resources feel limitless. Instead, you're embracing a more strategic, data-driven, and financially savvy approach to the cloud.
This has been a fascinating deep dive. As we wrap things up here, what's the one big takeaway you hope our listeners will remember?
I'd say this. Planning and estimating with FinOps isn't about limiting innovation or what you can do in the cloud. It's about empowering organizations to make informed decisions, optimize their investments, and ultimately get more bang for their buck.
It's about harnessing the incredible power of the cloud, but in a way that makes sense for your specific business. So you're aligning your goals, your budget, and your long-term vision.
Exactly. Yeah, and the best part, you don't have to do it alone. The FinOps Foundation is out there, and they've got tons of resources, a super active community, and that clear framework to guide you.
It's like having a map, a compass, and a whole group of experienced adventurers to support you on your FinOps journey. For our listeners who are ready to leave the Wild West of cloud costs behind, it sounds like there's a clear path forward. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into FinOps planning and estimating.